Hey folks, this is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, where we are always fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and a more accountable government. I'm Chris Sims. I'm the Alberta director for the CTF. I'm sitting here in Lethbridge, God's country. Franco, not to say there's not other parts of God's country. Franco, he's stationed in Mordor in Ottawa there. Hi, Franco.
Definitely not God's country. Sorry, Ottawa.
This is where all the waste of money is coming out of this top of this mountain. All right. And Devin is our in-house lawyer. He is our general counsel. He's also the Atlantic director. And he is are you in beautiful St. John's right now?
I am in beautiful St. John's, dying with humidity, but otherwise loving it. So,
oh, well, just got to buy more heat pumps, Devin. Come on. All right, get on that. All right, we have a lot to talk about here, and it is all about our very favorite government-funded media, state broadcaster. They love all those titles, the CBC. Okay, I wanted to jump into this with both of you. Because Franco, you're like right up the street from one of the headquarters of the CBC, and they're the ones that kind of set the tone for the Mean Girls amongst the Parliamentary Press Gallery in Ottawa. So they're super important, very influential that way. And Devin, you actually like go into court and fight stuff for realsies. And so I want both of your perspectives on this. I wanted to start with this headline that kind of skittered around, saying, oh, the CBC is doing away with its problematic bonuses. I thought that sounded like malarkey, and then it turns out that it was. Franco, what's the CBC doing? Are they actually rolling back bonuses and reducing pay and they're wising up?
Well, yeah, you might remember it was like 2 months ago, right? These headlines like the CBC canceling bonuses. Well, we just got some access to information records, and here's what those records show. Okay, yes, they canceled the bonuses, right? But they just handed out record pay raises. Record pay raises. Okay, so the documents that we show, yes, the bonuses were zero, but then they turned around and handed out $38 million in bonuses. $38 million in bonuses. So like, look, you're not really saving taxpayers money if you switch a taxpayer-funded bonus into a higher taxpayer-funded pay raise, right? So that's exactly what the CBC did. They did a sleight of hand. They're not saving taxpayers money. They didn't listen to Canadians. They misunderstood the assignment. What they're essentially doing is giving their bureaucrats built-in bonuses with higher pay raises, okay? So let me just break down these numbers, then we can kind of get into, the history of this fight. So last year, they handed out $38 million in pay raises. That is a record high, significantly higher than the pay raises in previous years, okay? The year before that, they handed out $11.5 million in pay raises. So
Franco,
pay raises,
that sounds like more money. Like I'm
that's
not
more money.
That sounds like more.
Beep boop, beep boop. They went from $11.5 million to $38 million in pay raises, okay? So yeah, they ended what they called a bonus, but then they just turned around and massively increased pay raises, an increase of about $26 million, which more than offsets the previous bonuses that they were handing out. So like, look, I don't think taxpayers care what the CBC calls its extra pay. Taxpayers just want the CBC to stop wasting so much money. And clearly they misunderstood the assignment here.
What gets me as a journalist full disclosure, I worked at the CBC for 6 weeks, and that isn't even why I'm mad. I'm mad because journalists shouldn't be paid by the government. This is a crazy waste of money and nobody's watching them. So we need to defund the CBC. But as a journalist, what's frustrating here is the CBC is supposedly a news organization primarily, and they know how this works. If a politician sat there and said, oh, well, it's coming out of a different labeled bucket, but we're still spending the same amount or more, they wouldn't let them get through that press conference intact. Like, come on, man. Like, I'm curious if they thought that people wouldn't notice, that they would just get the headline, oh, we're reducing our bonuses. We're getting rid of them. We're listening to Canadians. We went on a listening tour. Did they think that they were just going to get away with this and nobody would find out?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm picturing these like big wigs, right, in the CBC C-suite being like, folks, we solved our problem. We're going to end the bonuses and then just give people way higher pay. right? We'll take away this one bucket of cash and then we'll give them a bigger bucket of cash labeled pay raises. But, to your point, right? The CBC isn't fixing the problem, right? They didn't listen to Canadians. They're not saving taxpayers' money. If anything, it looks like the CBC brass is just trying to avoid a bad press day, right? Because let me just go back. Let me just go back in time here, right? So for many years, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, thank you to our audience and our supporters listening, we had some great investigative journalists, right, who've been filing access to information requests and pulling up all the bonus data that the CBC has handed out, right? So the CBC handed out $132 million in taxpayer-funded bonuses since 2015. Well, you might remember 2023. In 2023, they handed out $15 million in bonuses, right? Just weeks before Christmas of 2023, the CBC then announces hundreds of layoffs. Then there was this massive public backlash being like, wait a second, hold on. You are saying the cupboards are bare. You're crying for more taxpayer money, yet you still have $15 million to hand out in bonuses. What's going on? And then the former CBC president, Catherine Tate, was dragged into committee, multiple times over these bonuses. You had all parties being like, yeah, the bonuses aren't a good look. Maybe you should end the bonuses. You even had the Friends of Canadian Media, right? An advocacy organization that is all in favor of the state broadcast, saying that those bonuses were unbefitting of a national public broadcaster. And now those words were that organization's words, not mine, because it called it a public broadcaster. So look, everyone across the political spectrum was against the bonuses. Everyone, right? And then what does the CB...
I got to jump in here because poor Devin, we're just geeking out on this, but Devin might even remember this happening. To your point exactly, Franco, everyone was piling on, including Adrian Arsenault on the National. I have to get this out there because I still think partially it was a fever dream because I couldn't believe what I was watching. It was Adrian Arsenault on the TV on CBC, the National, who had her boss on boxes, so picture in picture, saying, what about the bonuses? And Catherine Tate with her signature fire engine red hair going, what bonuses? So that was unbelievable. So to Franco's point exactly, when he says everyone was upset at least about the bad press they were getting about the bonuses, he means literally everyone. The janitor was upset about it. Go ahead, Franco.
No, I mean, look, and then they come back. There's outrage across the political spectrum. And then they come back and okay, we solved the problem. No more bonuses. But then they're just jacking up the salaries and pay through these massive pay raises. Again, I just want to break down the numbers again, right? Okay. In 2023, they handed $11.5 million. In 2024, the most recent year, they say no bonuses, but then they jack up the pay raises from $11.5 million all the way up to $38 million, right? 3 times more. So look, they're not saving taxpayers' money. They're not listening to Canadians. They're just trying to avoid a bad press day by so-called ending these bonuses, turning around and just massively increasing the cost of their pay raises.
Okay. What's the answer here? Do we have a sunshine list for the CBC? Are we able to figure out how much these folks are making, or at least over a certain amount, not even naming names? What's the answer here for more accountability?
Well, the short answer is that we don't have a sunshine list for the CBC because unlike the vast majority of provinces, the federal government doesn't have a compensation disclosure to release the incomes of their top earners. So most provinces do, the federal government doesn't. But your friends at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we filed an access to information request to find out how many bureaucrats at the CBC are taking 6-figure salaries. And if you're drinking coffee, put it down right now before you spit it out, Chris. Last year, there were 1,800 CBC staffers, 1,800 CBC staffers taking a 6-figure salary, 1,800. Okay. Back in 2015, there was 438 6-figure salaries. Okay. So at the CBC, the 6-figure salaries have increased every single year since 2015. They went up 17% over the last year and 318% since 2015.
And what happened in 2015, Franco? That seems like a
I
special year.
I try to block it out.
Okay. All right. Guys, this is important, okay, for a billion reasons, or
Well,
more
1.4
likely,
billion reasons.
I see where you were going there. That was good. You caught that puck. All right. So for 1.4 billion reasons, this is important because all of this money is our money. Like taxpayers are funding the CBC. And I was going through some of their documents, and as I do, and remember back, this is so funny. Remember back when the CBC got big mad at Elon Musk for calling them government funded media? And they were super mad. They were going to stop posting on Twitter. They were going to take their ball and go home. My favorite. Well, number one, if that bugs you so much, stop taking money from taxpayers. Number one, stop digging. Number two, it's in their own documents. It says literally government funding, like 2 words in the CBC's fiscal reports. And yeah, it was $1.4 billion last year. Another little tidbit I wanted to throw in here. Remember when it turned out that Catherine Tate, again, the CEO that has now left the CBC, was getting paid around $500,000 per year? And she was CEO level 7 for the kids who are following along at home who cover this as journalists. Well, it turns out, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, because the new boss is Marie-Philippe Bouchard. Guess what? CEO level 7. She's also making about $500,000 per year. So to your point exactly, Franco, on them not learning a lesson and just trying to add something to a different labeled bucket, they're doing exactly the same thing with this CEO. That's what really gets me here is the lack of transparency. I wanted to, if Franco, if you want to take a breather for a second, I wanted to bring Devin in on this because you wrote a great piece in the Toronto Sun newspaper chain. People look it up. It's Drover, busted CBC caught trying to keep Canadians in the dark. Now, we know they don't love gushing about how much they spent on that big glowy desk on the National or how much they pay their at-issue panel members. Last I knew, back a million years ago in the mid-2000s, it was about $400 a day every time they were on that panel. I don't know what it is now. So, could be more, could be less. Devin, what's happening with the CBC and the Taxpayers Federation and courtrooms? What's going on here?
Yes, I mean it's so important what we're doing on this, and so grateful for our supporters who are helping us with this fight. The CBC keeps taxpayers in the dark, and I think that's very, very clear. And as Franco mentioned, here at the CTF, we file access information requests. These are requests that we can make under the law to get access to information about how the government is spending your money. We file these to figure out questions like how many people are making over $100,000 at the CBC, or a lot of other questions about how your money is being spent. The thing is, they really don't like answering us, to the point that we've even had to now take them to court, and it looks like there's other court fights on the horizon against the CBC. Take, for example, I was in Ottawa just a few weeks ago, grilling a CBC executive on how much they're spending on advertising. You would think this is something they disclose in their annual reports. You look at a normal annual report from a government body, it breaks down their expenditures. Instead, they don't want to tell us how much they're spending on advertising. They don't want to tell us how much they're wasting on promoting some of their show hosts on bus, bus lanes or big billboards. They don't want to tell us. And that is fundamentally wrong. And Canadian courts in the past have recognized that it is always in the public interest for Canadians to know how their money is being spent. And that's what we're doing with the CBC. And actually, I look at the calendar up in the corner of my screen right now. We're just days away from the CBC's lawyers having to file a response to our latest lawsuit. So in just days from now, they have to get back to us and try to justify why they don't think Canadians should know how their money's being spent. And that's exactly what we're doing with this lawsuit. We are taking the CBC in federal court. They have less than 10 days now to get the response in, and then we'll be setting for a court hearing as soon as possible so we can get in front of a federal court judge and make the case that the CBC cannot be keeping taxpayers in the dark.
Okay, so I understand this in a normal people frame of reference. So when I'm sitting there watching the hockey game, okay, and it's on like Sportsnet or whatever, I refuse to call it Hockey Night in Canada. It's not the same without Don Cherry, so I'm not letting that go. So when I'm watching a hockey game and I see the billionth freaking ad for CBC Gem for whatever they're promoting. Is that the ad buy cost you're looking for? Or is it just the printy, let's look at a CBC's host face in 4D in like 4 stories in downtown Toronto? Like, what element of the advertising cost are we looking for here?
So this is what makes it interesting. Government bodies often like to hide behind releasing certain information. For example, if I filed a request for how much they're spending on this particular ad for CBC Gem, they'd say, oh, it's going to harm our competitive position. And they use it as a way to withhold the information. What we ask for is the aggregate. We're asking for how much they're spending in total per year on advertising. And they're still bloody refusing to give us this information.
They won't even. Okay.
It makes no sense. I understand, you're competing for a specific ad spot or a billboard. And I mean, I love our one in Ottawa that Franco's always spearheading for us. I understand maybe if we give out this particular bit of information, it might hurt us in negotiating a new ad. We're asking for the total, what you would think would be disclosed. You would think it'd already be disclosed. Instead, they're making us go through hoops. They're making us go through a bureaucratic process, first to appeal it to the Information Commissioner, and now having to take it to federal court just to get an answer for taxpayers that should already be available. It is ridiculous, Chris.
And just as an inside little thing, spoiler alert, as far as, releasing information that could hurt you and your competitors in the frame of a massive monstrosity of a national media organization that has how many people making 6 figures, Franco?
1,831.
Okay. That's obscene. Okay. This is like, I don't know, an enormous pink elephant getting upset because some chicken, might take their role on a stage play. Like, there's no comparison to the CBC state broadcaster to private media, even though private media, unfortunately, is largely on government payroll now. Like, as somebody who has packed gear for kilometers and has shot video and cut tape and booked guests, yeah, I'll give you an example. I moved from what was then the biggest daily political show that started at 5 o'clock on private TV. You can probably figure out what show that was. We had 2 producers. I moved over to CBC. I wasn't part of their 5 o'clock show, but I could see them. There were 12 people sitting over there, plus 6 in Toronto. Just producers, okay? So yeah, there's no idea of losing out to a competitor. It is not as if Global's going to swoop in and eat their lunch for that billboard. All right, where do we go from here? So just to recap, they didn't actually really end the bonuses because they just jacked up the pay by 38%.
No, the pay raises are $38 million, up from 11.5.
Okay, that was worse. Okay, so they just increased increased their pay. They haven't actually reduced the CEO's pay because Marie-Philippe Bouchard is in the same salary range as Catherine Tate. And they're refusing to even tell us how much they're spending on advertising, Devin. And so we're taking them to court.
That sounds absolutely correct. I wish it was not the case, but that is exactly what is happening. And I look forward to, as soon as I receive the documents from the CBC, as soon as we get served from the CBC's lawyers, we're going to be applying as soon as possible with the federal court to get this set down for a hearing in Ottawa.
Just a quick, anything I haven't covered yet, Franco, that we need to get out there in this one?
Just reiterate that the Sunshine List, the number of 6-figure salaries has gone up 318% since 2015, right? From 438 to now 1,800 staffers. Those salaries alone cost taxpayers $240 million.
I hope private radio producers are listening to this. I really do, because that is just a heck of a ton of money. And again, it's coming from taxpayers. Quick little reminder here for history lessons. The next time, your sister-in-law starts saying, oh, well, the CBC created media in Canada. They're the first ones for CBC radio. No, they aren't, and they weren't. Okay, back in the day before the war, we had over 100 private radio stations across Canada who were doing just fine. They were doing everything from farmers' weather reports to news to live opera broadcasts from Chicago and New York and Toronto. It was amazing. So yeah, this notion that the CBC pioneered media in Canada, not true. Number 2, next to nobody is watching this. So if you try tuning into the supper hour newscast, like the 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock news on TV in places like Calgary or even Toronto, the viewership is so low, it is a rounding error. Like your average YouTube video, just from some rando, gets more viewers than the CBC's behemoth 6 o'clock news in these local stations. Number 3, even their flagship show on prime time, so CBC News World, the one that would cover a coronation or an election, 1.8% audience share. What that means is, of the available Canadians who were able to watch television at the time, 98% of them are choosing to watch something else. And if you get into their fiction, like their non-news broadcasts, it gets even grimmer because their top-rated shows are produced overseas, not even made in Canada. So folks, help us fight this. If you want to save your money, if you believe in a free press, that journalists should not be paid by the government, and fundamentally you believe in accountability, you want to know where all of your money is going because frankly, we have unmoney right now. Our debt's $1.2 trillion, burning through $1 billion a week in interest payments. Defund the CBC. Head to our website, taxpayer.com, sign the petition to defund the CBC, and you'll be the first to know as soon as Devin actually makes them cough up that information in court. Thanks for watching.